Okay. Good evening. I'm like, I never know what time it is before I start these things. But I wanted to go through the rest of the books that I had for this most recent, the graphic novels that I have for the most recent haul that I had really quick before I gotta go return these books back to the library. Yeah. As far as this beanie goes, because I definitely want to preface while this is on, my hair is not done. Like, I started it, but I was going to wait until I finished to start this. But then I was like, it's 6 o'clock already. I'm actually ready to take a break. I'm hungry. And when that happens, I'll be over it. But anyway, I want to go through this haul. I think it's only 3 books. Yeah, we'll go in this order. So here we have Swimming in Darkness by Lucas Harari. This is a pretty interesting book in my opinion. Got kind of wet because I just got out the shower, but this is a pretty... I'm not going to do like a number scale rating for any of these unless that's a more accurate way to describe my opinion of what I read, but as far as this book goes, this is a pretty interesting read. It is a fictional story based off of the Val Therms, I think is what it is. Yes, the Vals, they're called Vals Therms. I think that's how you pronounce it, Thermes. And it is... These therms are essentially like these huge ass baths that were they weren't created, but they were already they were there based off thermal springs. They were springs, and an architecture. I can just read the back of the book. My God, the architecture who kind of built around these hot springs or these thermal springs to create this like resort style situation, which you can kind of see is reflected on the front. Peter Zumthor. It's based off of his work and just kind of like the mystic nature of the mountains that surround the Therms. That and just kind of it's more of a streamlined plot within this graphic novel of this young lad who has done an extensive amount of research on the Therms and is now going to the Swiss Alps in order to inquire more about them, to see them for himself and to see like the nature of what they hold or whatever. And it's kind of not a spooky story, but it has a bit of a spooky kind of like I said, a mystic vibe to it, where it's like the Therms kind of have a life of their own. And the folks that work there and the people that work there kind of have a way of speaking to and or about the Therms, even to to tourists and travelers, and they have their stories around its productions. I think it went through it went through a couple of phases before it kind of became what this is now, what it is currently since 1996. Look at me, I remembered that. But this was an interesting read. I didn't necessarily follow the story that well. Like, I don't think that the story didn't hit like that I assumed it would, but to kind of learn about the fact that these Therms exist and that that also there are, and it's mentioned in this book as well, but the Romans also had this concept of creating these big baths and these big these huge baths, which you can look up. This is, I said this before, but this is Val's Therms, and you can look it up. Even on Pinterest, you'll see like a lot of nice resourceful pictures around it. And it's pretty cool to look at, and honestly cool to think about. But yeah, what's mentioned in here is the Roman baths, and kind of their origin story as well. Why the Roman Empire decided to create these large baths, and essentially it was thought to be so that, and it was, since it was big and free, it was essentially thought to mean, that a lot of people could come here and get clean and da 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 da. But it was actually useful. They built around it. They built within it like ways for folks to escape, even if they were to ever be attacked or something of that nature. And so I thought that was really cool to think about and grab from this story, Swimming in Darkness. I also really liked if you, but based off my other one, a lot of the books that I had, a lot of the graphic novels that I had were like more black and white. This has a little bit more color to it, but it's still kind of along the same theme of like blues and then like a little bit of red for color. Like genuinely what you see on the cover is mainly the colors that they use, and I thought that was pretty cool. A bigger text, a larger sized book, but as far as like thickness goes, it's pretty. I got through it in like an hour or so. So Swimming in Darkness by Lucas Harari. Interesting. This thickie is called The Drifting Life, and this is by, I'm gonna get this right, Yoshihiro Tatsumi. This one, you can tell it's a thick one. A lot of black and white. This one drew me in. I think I got it because I really like the animation style. To be completely honest, I did not finish this. I did not finish this. Truthfully, I wanted to, but I just didn't. Honestly, because it's really thick, but also because it has a lot of connecting information that I find interesting in here. This book is apparently to me now that I've read it, is from a very famed manga artist. Specifically around the time that manga started to kind of like blow up, he is a big name within that. Or I don't want to say a big name, but he's well known. He's definitely done a lot of work to contribute to the field of manga. Along with a lot of other people, but he was up there. Let me see. Oh, that was what I wanted to mention about this book. It talks a lot about kind of like the beginning, his beginning specifically, because it's an autobiographical kind of graphic novel. Some of the story, he says, is twisted, or some of the names are written differently in order to kind of protect the people within the stories. But as far as like the situations themselves, like the circumstances, those are all true. And so the stories themselves, they're all true. And so he really gets into his interest into drawing manga, and how kind of his pathway, right? His life of getting into it. And he mentions why I really was like, oh, I'm really into this. Because he mentioned him like very early on in the beginning. He mentions Osamu Tezuka, and I have the book right here so I can, which last time I talked about Osamu Tezuka's book, Apollo Song, and I did not get the best thoughts around it, but he does talk a lot about Osamu Tezuka, and how he connected with him early on, and how Osamu Tezuka was another famed manga writer, author, all of that good stuff, and did amazing work in that, apparently. And so he talks about it. Like I said, I didn't finish because it is a very, it's kind of like one of those books that's like, there's a lot, not necessarily a lot going on, but there's like a lot that he covers, like dates and like these very important like moments in time from where he was from, specifically within his personal life, but also in kind of like the global realm, like movies and music and those kinds of influences that were kind of shifting and shaping the time that he was in, and kind of like what allowed for him to be the manga artist that he is, but also what allowed for manga to be what it is also. And so I think that this was a really interesting book. I would more so want this on my shelf, so that I can look to and reference, because I think there was a lot of like cool, like I said, there's story in here, but there was a lot of really good like connections and things to be made from this. And talks about yeah. I think that's all I want to say. Like I said, I did not finish this, so I don't necessarily have a full full summary or like thought on this book in its entirety, on this novel in its entirety, but I really did think that it has a really cool way of storytelling, and like I said, had some interesting things to know that I thought was interesting, and that tied into this last book that I'm going to talk about, which is Grass, which is by Keum Gendry-Kim. I'm learning Korean, so I should know how to say these a little bit more. But Gendry-Kim. And this was, I kind of wanted to go in that order because that book started off talking about the end of the Japanese war, the war that the Japanese were in, and this book kind of is a focused story on a comfort woman. It's not autobiographical. It's I don't know if it's a biography either, because it's not technically. It is about the Oksun's life, Granny Oksun. Yeah, it's about her life specifically as a comfort woman, as she was a woman from Korea who, due to all of these very tragic circumstances, was put into this life of being a comfort woman, while the war between, I have to make sure, because like and this sounds very, very shady, but like I get my words mixed up, but yeah, because she talks about it, and I read it a while ago. This is another one that I would have to kind of put on my shelf to reread. It was not a fun story to read at all. To know the effects of someone who, like I said, became a comfort woman, and a comfort woman, they were called comfort women, but depicted by this story, they were women who were kind of in these hostile situations, and where they were forced to service men who were in the war, for little to absolutely nothing. Definitely assaulted on a daily basis. I should give a lot of content warning and trigger warnings with this particular text of sexual assault, period, violence, sexual violence. I think that pretty much names it, but it's very centered around that, because the life of a comfort woman was not at all comforting, and that was very much so clearly depicted in this book. As the writer, the author of the book, interviewed a comfort woman staying at one of the homes for former comfort women. She was interviewing who she was calling Granny Oaksoon, and created this graphic novel to depict her story, which, like I said, was not at all a fun story to read. I would say, I wouldn't necessarily, with books like this, I'm never like, you should go out and read it. But I definitely think it's important to, especially like when we think about the effects of all of the heinous shit that this world puts into play, who that affects and how that affects them, whose stories do we see mostly, but then whose stories do we miss out on. And like I said, once again, the often painful effects of those situations by folks whose stories are mostly untold, or mostly overshadowed as part of that time. So I'm never like, go out and read this. But this did provide me some more insight. I don't necessarily know if it was a great insight, but it gave me some informative insight around just this time, right? Like really what was happening, right? Like what was happening kind of in this global sense, or this like widely known sense, right? That these two spaces, or I think it was the Japanese and the Chinese who were at war, but I do not want to say that fully because I'm gonna get that really confused. But separation is another one of those content warnings. Separation, abandonment, those things are heavily in here. But yes, like I said, would not recommend for people to pick this up right away unless you're ready or willing to consider these stories and the effects of them. However, yeah, unless you're willing to consider the effect of them. But I do think that this graphic novel in particular told the story well. There was a part at the end, and I'm very weary about when this happened, so I won't necessarily say whether or not this is something that should have just, I don't know. But I am very worried. Like I said, this was specifically about Granny Oaksoon's story. And I know that like when we hear, like, you know, often when we have like these kind of narratives that we're speaking about and speaking to, and we're talking to the survivors, and you know, the survivor, Granny Oaksoon, seemed, and how she was depicted within this graphic novel definitely seems still very lively despite everything that has happened. Still has seemed to kept her sense of humor and her sense of, like, you know, graciousness and all of these things that have or I can't say kept, but you know, she has these things with her in her old age, and in spite of just kind of the life that she had. But I think that like, at the end it was just, it kind of gave this like, yes, this is everything that has happened, but look, she's still a brave woman. And I kind of have some tips about that, because I mean, like, it just feels really weird to kind of like to give someone that like heroic honor for having to survive such heinous situations, to commend them on their bravery and their strength in situations that honestly everybody else should have recognized was wrong, for these women, specifically Granny Oaksoon, to go through. Like, shouldn't have to be brave through that. You shouldn't have to be heroic or strong through that. Like, niggas should have definitely knew that they were doing some fuck shit. And so with that, I'll say like that's kind of like my only knock at this particular book. But the story itself, the way that the story was told, and like I said, this is a true situation, so true story and situation. And so it's like something that I really took in as a reality for this world, and a reality that someone lived through. And how tragic was that, in my opinion from reading this. So yeah, this one is called Grass. Yeah, I would honestly say I didn't know about the role of comfort women, or the existence of comfort women as a narrative or anything. Even though this book will, and I'm not in a rush to do this, but I think like it's something that I'll definitely continue, since I have awareness of now. I'll be looking out for it, and when I see it, I'll definitely like look into it a lot more and kind of engage with it. But like I said, I didn't realize the existence of comfort women until I read this, and to know that this was a very prominent thing, a very, very prominent existence. Like I said, I'll definitely be looking into it more as well. So I think that this is it for this time. I'm gonna go eat. Next round, I've read some things that I'm like, oh, I should probably talk about things that I've read prior to this little haul situation that I should talk about, because there are some really good books that I read that I'm like, you should go somewhere. But I won't do that today. I think next haul, though, they just shut things back down. Well, not everything. They shut down our library again. And so our library only has, I think, pickup right now. And I can still, like, reserve books online. But I don't get to go in and, like, flip through the pages. Oh, I forgot to kind of give the title page is a little bit more colorful, but this one is also very heavily black and white. I keep going to like the chapter. See, I keep going to this part, but as you can see, very black and white. I'll show another page. Boom, 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 boom. A very much so black and white. But I thought that the storytelling in this was pretty good. I love graphic novels for that reason. I know it can be easier to read because there's a lot less words. But like I feel like sometimes with graphic novels, especially when I first started reading them, I started to skim through the pictures and not really pay attention to what the pictures, like I got the general gist of the pictures, but as I started reading more graphic novels or more comics in general, I started to really pay attention to the pictures, because they, depending on how like they are ordered and organized and stuff like that, they really do emphasize the story and really do add like really great information to the story as well. So that's that. But like I was saying, I am going to the next round. Oh, I don't get to go in and feel the book and like flip through the pages, and I can't hold it in my hands and like be like, I'm gonna take this one home. I have to do it over the internet, and usually that's just the title, cover, and the summary of the story, and that's a little bit harder, a little bit more work, but work that I'm willing to do, because I think I want to get children's books next time. As much as I want to go through like the thicker things that I read, well, this is pretty thick too, but the more wordy things that I read, I find that doing graphic novels and, like I said, moving into children's books is much more helpful, much more fun for me too, because I just like to read, and I think like children's books offer a really good playground for me. It's a really great space to kind of like read from. Especially it's like, what are we talking to our children about? I think that children's books are amazing in that way. for me to read, because it gets me there. But yeah, other than that, that is my end of this book haul review. And until next time.